Hello and welcome to Plow and Potato. I'm Sean Bonet. This is Joffrey Swait. We are coming to you high above Moscow here in the Spud Pub.
Welcome to the big show.
Today, we're going to be talking about how Christians should respond to the news.
We had a whole conversation at the beginning of the show about how we were going to intro everything, but we didn't go into detail. And I admit, I thought there'd be more. I find myself unprepared. All right.
Wait, no, you're right. You're right. I forgot the thing. Oh, right, take two. What? Today, we're going to be talking about how Christians should respond to the news, specifically because this last week in the news, there's just been total disaster, breaking news
for Christians.
James Coates Church up in Alberta, Canada, has been fenced off. They are being prevented from going into their building, and that really stirred me up. It stirred you up. It stirred about every Christian up because the I don't know if it's righteous anger, some kind of fleshly anger, some kind of emotion is pouring out of us, and what that instance shows is it play in all these other types of news. You get this news about this man trying to be a girl or whatever kind of shenanigans the world is raging over, and you kind of want to rage with them like, I don't like this.
So what we want to do with this episode is we're going to come back around full circle to talking about Grace Life Church in Edmonton, Alberta, and what the Canadian government has done to them. But the journey is going to consist of talking about the news cycle, social media, and how Christians respond, how they react, and really talking about our own personal lives, our family lives, and how that has affected our personal lives. Always thinking about how we're responding as saints of God, and then we'll come back around to the James Coates thing.
We live in the age of light, so to speak. We're very enlightened by technology nowadays. So we've got 24/7 news access because of the internet and how the internet lives in our pocket.
Yeah.
I was watching some of the coverage of the James Coates Church story through Marcus Pittman, and he made a note that, I don't know how necessarily accurate this is, but he was just at least noting that now we can record the persecution of the church. So I agree with the persecution. I think he said something about like for the first time ever, but ever since that's been an option, people, anytime there's persecution in the church, it's being recorded. And that's just showing this age we're living in.
Right. But then we have to think about how we respond. And honestly, so Kimberly and I, moving away from the story of Grace Life, and just thinking about the last 10, 15, 20 years of our lives.
Yeah.
And so both Kimberly and I, for example, will periodically fast from Facebook. And Kimberly more than I. And there have been times when we've been having conversations and we just say, well, okay, you need to be off of Facebook for at least a couple of weeks because it is messing you up. Right? Yep. And so what happened with Grace Life really kind of ruined both of our days.
It did.
Right? Had a very strong emotional impact on us. I'm sure that many of the viewers and listeners were also impacted very strongly on that day. But I can guarantee you it's not the first time. 4 or 5 years ago, transgender or sexless bathrooms in North Carolina, right?
Yeah.
Before that, election controversies with President Obama. Before that, whatever it might have been, for the last 15 years, there's been a constant flood of this stuff that is going to impact us emotionally. So the question is, should it? How much should it? What should our priorities be? Right?
We have to first ask a question. In this day where we have great access to what's going on in the world, how much of it should we engage with? Like, should we be concerned about what's going on in Iran and China? And under what stories should a Christian be interested in general or give themselves to, or even a time in a day? Right?
Well, and I think action is really what determines the answer to that. Because when you say engage, you could mean engage with the news, or you could mean actually engage with the action in that place, in that time, right? So if being outraged about the Chinese government's treatment of Christians or of the Uyghurs in Western China.
Yeah.
It is outrageous, and to some degree, it's good to be informed if you're actually going to do something. But we often fall into the trap of thinking that being informed in itself is something, and it's not. Like, what is that causing? What is it provoking? What is it changing? It's just making you mad at communists. But what is that at the end of the day?
Well, and this is a really hard thing because as Christians who have passions for Christian freedom and how our brothers and sisters are being treated, when we read about the Uyghurs or anybody being persecuted in China, which there are many, or now our Canadian brothers and sisters, we want to know what's going on. We want to be in on the story because there's almost an element of keeping up with our own history and current events.
Right.
So that we might be simply informed, but also wiser to understand the times we're in.
Yeah.
So then it's like, that's a virtue. That's something that's you should be able to be hip to.
That's right.
It's like, but when does it go too far?
Yeah, and you're informing yourself for a reason. Right. So there's definitely, I think we've all experienced these loops to one degree or another, but there are people whose whole lives are consumed by this loop of simply learning more and more. Right. So there's sharpening
Idleness,
this blade. Yeah, it does become idleness. And you're sharpening your blade until it becomes a toothpick. And what good is that? Like, what are our priorities? Right. And for nearly all of us, our priority is worshiping faithfully and raising our families.
Yeah.
That's what God has called us to. If being very well informed makes you a better father, a better mother, a better child, a better part of the body of Christ, then good. That's great. But that needs to be the focus, being a member of Christ's body. And so ask yourself this question: can I be a contributing member of Christ's body without a computer, without a TV, without a phone? The answer to that is yes. Does having a computer or a phone make me a contributing member of Christ's body? Nope. So then we have to realize everything that we're engaging with and everything we're informing ourselves with ought to be character shaping.
Yeah.
And if we can't handle it, or it takes us down, or it distracts us from our work, if it creates turmoil in our lives, then we don't need any piece of that.
And this is where wisdom has to come into play, because so much of what we learn, especially when it's current events and related to Christians, it stirs us up. There's almost an investment in what's going on that leads to the distraction, to where you're actually maybe not being faithful to a role you have in that moment. But then you get some time down away from, like, time goes on and you're removed from the situation, and you find you're actually wiser because you've processed and reflected on what went on and what you did. And it seems like some people might then get to that point and say, it was actually good that I did that. Although in the moment I knew really clearly I was being unfaithful, specifically because I had this objective. I need to be working on this, but I wasn't. How does the Christian respond to that when I'm getting better because I'm learning more and I'm actually feeling like a better Christian now because I'm wrapping my head about the kind of times I'm living in?
Well, I think that's great. The question you have to ask yourself is it controlling me or am I controlling it?
Okay.
Like, let's step away from the
Are you controlling the growth almost? The wise wisdom.
Well, I mean, there's wise wisdom. I do love wise wisdom.
I was trying to whisper it, Joffrey. Gosh.
But that's beautiful. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, let's move away from the news and let's say that you have an enthusiasm for Russian literature or
Russian music,
the Psalms of the Genevan Psalter.
Yeah, if anyone has that,
that is an actual enthusiasm of yours, right? And you actually are. You're doing formal studies with it, but if that is controlling your life, then you need to be rid of it. But if studying Genevan Psalters is something that you can use to bless others, right? Then you ought to be doing it. If it makes you a richer and better person, then you ought to be doing it. There has to be a lightness and a poetry to it. We need to understand that there is lightness and poetry to death, to persecution, to all of that. This is is a light and momentary trouble. And so as long as we can take these troubles and keep them light and momentary, still be about our business, then we're good. And we may even be able to take that next step of, I'm going to get stuck in, and I'm actually going to do the work to make the world better for Jesus.
Right.
And so, but that actually introduces another gray area, which I think is difficult for a lot of us, which is it's easy to fall prey to the idea that by sharing something, we're contributing in some small way to improving the situation. When in fact, what often we're doing is just increasing the turmoil for everybody, right? If you were outraged, let's go ahead and start cycling back to James Coates. If you were outraged on that day, as I was, what did you do about it? Right? I didn't send any money to the church.
Mm-hmm. Did you call Paladin or Fast Fence?
No.
That just became the
thing to do.
Yeah. Well, especially, when you're just like to call Fast Fence, which I think is a great charge. Like, hey, you guys should drop a contract. But then when you consider how just junked they are by the government, it's like, they don't even care.
Right.
You're just annoying them.
Yeah, but that may be actually a thing you do, right? We can't go around, like sometimes the effectiveness of an action is not where its worth is, right? Once again, the poetry of the action. But did you actually do something?
Right.
Right? And what are you doing locally that's connected to that?
Okay.
How much in your town are you doing to guarantee the freedoms of Christians and of the church?
Exactly.
Right.
Let's take off with those 2 points because they sort of work in the opposite direction of our exhortations, which are still a part of how a Christian can acceptably live. You can engage in the news so you consume and understand it, but then take it to the next level by giving commentary on it, providing insights to it, so that you are shaping your mind further.
This, by the way, is kind of the gray area I was kind of hinting toward, right? Because simply sharing something or being some guy who's caught in this loop of always this I'm learning as much as I can, and I'm sharing my outrage to other outraged people who are in the same loop, that does no good at all. But then we do find ourselves having our little small impacts, right? The little conversations that we can have with people. And so there is a bit of a gray area there. And you have to be reading the tone, right? Like, how much am I getting caught up in this loop, and how much am I contributing to others getting caught in this loop? Or am I actually blessing and equipping the saints to fight?
And you Christians out there, you should have an encouragement, and maybe this is an area you should grow and do more of, is taking a news story, understand to a degree, and then sharing it, and the comments that you marry to it are like really helpful to you. Like, you learn more about how you should respond. Topic of the show.
I think there should be more Christian, just to use a terribly overused phrase that I use all the time, content creators. Right? So are you just clicking on the share button? Or are you writing or filming or recording something to say with that? Are you, how many Christians share stuff simply on broad platforms like Facebook or Instagram with no determined target? Mm-hmm. Are you in a WhatsApp group with 20 other guys and having a legit conversation about that? That's interesting. Sharing it into, Facebook is the ether. At this point. It's just, you're just putting it out there and it'll bounce around and hit a couple of people. There won't be any real interactions. But on Facebook Messenger, on WhatsApp, on Discord, and these more closed platforms, you can actually have real conversations. We have a Discord.
Plum potato. Go ahead.
But that's, that has more of an impact. Where you're having a legitimate conversation with friends or disciples or whatever it is, and you're actually building and equipping something out of this. There's a purpose to this beyond simply transmitting outrage.
Yes. Transmitting your emotions, which is fascinating. As Reformed people, we're very concerned about emotional culture and being too led by emotions. But we usually just couch our emotions in the frustrations. Like, look how idiotic everybody is.
Yeah.
Expression, 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 emotion, emotion, emotion. I want to add another angle to the Facebook ether, the audience idea is, this is something I've been thinking a lot more on my social media is, what am I communicating about myself and my life, and to who, like who's receiving it? Like, who are these people? I think we should also, like, you need to do that more. I think it'll just help your focus as you're thinking about what's the point of social media, side thing there, and what's the point of the things that you're creating, the content you're creating. But it's fascinating how you need to keep your mind open to those in your friends list who really aren't in your circles.
Yeah.
Like the Reformed Christian circle, who, when you share the Pastor Coates story or some other story related to Christian life, reaches somebody, and you're the only source where they're getting this sort of news and angle. We should just be sensitive to that and kind of lean sort of evangelistically towards that way, not just to like inform and bring people in, to sort of wake them up to what's going on in Christian life.
There's so much that's happening in an echo chamber.
Yeah.
Right. But we tell ourselves it's not.
Yeah.
Right. We tell ourselves that we are in fact the ones breaking this by sharing. Right. And that's not the case. We need to have specific people in mind
who are not a part of the chamber.
Oh yeah, or it depends on what you're trying to do.
Yeah,
but yeah, absolutely.
Well, and that's a good point, and we've talked about this before, that when you go to share or create something, you have a focused audience. Maybe like, I really want to this person and all these people who are like them, but you're also going to have these outliers who sort of get swept in from that gust and that pull of what you created. Yep. And then that's just a really neat fruit along the way.
Yeah, and simply sharing information as opposed to actually creating some content changes that, right? The effectiveness of that. And also I think we need to realize, oh man, this is my problem. I've done this 2 shows in a row where I think of something and I store it away.
And you can't dig it back up.
I'm so distracted by the troubles of the world, dude. So that has actually reminded me. Right. So if you are actually talking to specific people, you have people in mind when you're saying the things that you're saying, that will clean up the toxic feelings that happen when you're just sharing all this terrible news, all this terrible stuff, and you end up creating this echo chamber because all you're doing is sharing, no actual creation, no actual positive contributions. So you feel dirty inside. And I think we've all experienced that social media toxicity.
Yeah.
But if you actually feel like you're talking to somebody, or better yet, if you actually are in the middle of a conversation with somebody, it becomes clean. It feels clean.
Why does it clean up like that?
It's because there's a purpose to it.
Yeah, it's not just your diary.
Exactly. The toxicity is the same toxicity, because you used the word idleness earlier.
Yeah.
That's how you feel when you're idle. When you're not doing the work you know you ought to do, and you get this bad feeling in the pit of your chest. Mm-hmm. It's the same feeling you get when you're looping on social media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you kind of feel there's like a sense of sharing. What have I done on social media? So, practically speaking, how should we respond to the news? We've talked a lot about the know-how, but what are some things that we can build upon from all of these insights that we've given?
Well, I think we need to be more judicious about how much time we spend online and where.
Okay.
I certainly think we need to stay away from talking heads.
We're talking head stations.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like there are shows that you and I watch that have heads that talk on them. And yes. I don't mean that, but you think about the 24-hour news cycle type of talking
where
heads.
It's ticker news, and there's always the next story, and then here's the stocks too, by the way.
Right, exactly. But beyond that, then, I think the real transition happens with making them move from telling ourselves we're informing people to actually having something positive to say. The message itself may not be positive, but as positive as in actual action, right?
Yeah.
Calls to action, actual content. And that will not feel hollow if you're actually doing stuff at home and in your town.
Yeah.
Right? So again, the focus is show up and worship, show up and kiss your wife, show up, raise your babies. Like that's what the focus is.
Yeah.
Right? If you're doing that and you become the sort of father, the sort of husband, the sort of church member who has other things to bring their community. And that other thing to bring may be expertise in Genevan Psalms. It may be expertise in Chinese affairs. It may be expertise on how to resist the oppression of the church. But whatever it is you're bringing something real and concrete and something that will bless people.
Yeah, and that's really great. It's going to the top of your practical ideas. It's hard to control what you consume because so much of it is just right there. Anytime you get on the internet, it's like you don't know if you're going to see an advertisement for bread that's for sale. You don't know if you're going to see, the next piece on the Daily Wire, because that's just like the idea feed.
Yeah.
So anywhere you go, you're not really safe from it. But your second point really captures you into the principle that goes into, be careful on where you're going to consume and how long is when you are there. What's your purpose? What are you doing?
Exactly right.
Doing.
You need to have direction.
And the doing can be a virtue, like we mentioned earlier, the doing of providing an understanding. How should we interpret this thing? Here's some thoughts. Here are my thoughts, because the thinking, the know-how is very important. But then you just made a great point about how does this translate locally? Okay, we see Alberta, Canada. What's going on with their government and their businesses and their churches there? How do you, in your city, how do you prevent that? How do you fight that even though it's not here?
Yeah, so I made a video on Joffrey the Giant on the Great Grace Life Coates Day, right? That impacted us both. And I'm not sure if it had the effect that I wanted. I'm still digesting it a little bit because I did kind of do it in the heat of emotion. But so I did a video that was in English, Portuguese, and Spanish.
All at one.
All at once. No subtitles. Just, and I was angry and I let some of my anger show. And that's fine. That's good. But what I wanted to accomplish with that video, because, I have a Brazilian audience. So what I wanted to accomplish was for Christians around the West to realize that this is actually highly local.
Yes.
Right? And that people aren't alone in this. So it's not to be outraged about what's happening with James Coates. It's to be outraged about what the church is doing and what your church is doing. Right?
Yeah.
You can help the saints in Canada by working your church and your town.
Yes.
Right. And so, as it was a broad scope, right? I mean, I was talking to everybody in the West, but by using the different languages and having these different audiences that I have, in my head as I was talking, that was a message I was trying to send, was that, if you are in a church in Brazil that is closed, as many people I talk to are, or you're in a church in the East that is closed, in the East of the United States, as many people I talk to are, get something done about it. Do something.
Yes.
Get kicked out of your church.
Yes.
Maybe that's do something.
Yeah.
That's actually what the saints should be taking from what's going on in Canada.
Absolutely.
Right? And the saints in Canada need to see that. They need to see that we are supporting them by getting in the same kind of trouble as they are.
Right.
Open your churches.
Yes.
Force the issue where you are so that they're not standing alone, right? Forget about expressing your outrage about what's happening there. Forget about sending them money. I mean, those are all fine things.
Yeah.
But the real reason they're having troubles is that you didn't get your own church open.
Amen. Ooh.
Oh, starting
Preach,
to rant
Slade.
again.
There it goes, Pastor. But that's the practical exhortation. How do you, Christian, respond to the news? What's your town doing? How does the news that you are consuming translate to your specific context? Figure that out and establish the vision that you have. Establish that Christian future and put in the work.
Yeah.
Take on the plow, you get that potato.
Ooh.
So, thank you very much for joining us. We will now formally sign off.
So long, everybody. Oh, wait. Again, I did it.
No.
Wait. I got this. Okay, I start, right?
Indeed.
Okay. So keep your hand on the plow.
And keep your gun rather loose in the holster.
Boom.
Bang.